Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and in this month's newsletter, I did put a link to a free pattern called Little Buddy. Now, it's not a buddy as your friend, it is a little bud, as in a rosebud. Now, the pattern is free and it does do a full-size quilt, but I'm going to turn it into a table runner and change it up just a little bit. It is a fusible applique, and I do have a tip on how to maximize our fusible web. I also like to stop as least as I can when I am machine stitching. So I do have a tip on how I let the machine help me do all of that applique, hopefully without stopping often. So I'll share those with you while I am making this quilt, and it's going to be a fun quilt. I'm using the fabric Jazz. So here's the pattern that I'm talking about, called Little Buddy, and they're little rosebuds. Now this quilt is 37.5 inches by 47.5 inches, but I am only going to make a table runner. So instead of using all of these blocks, I am going to make 12 blocks and have 2 rows going along that edge. I'm going to take and have one rosebud facing in one direction and the other one facing in the other direction. Now I love this black and blue background, but for the quilt I think I'm going to change it and really have these beautiful fabrics called Jazz Age with a nice soft beige background. So the quilt is made up with these blocks that are 8 inches by 10 inches. So that's the size of the background fabric that we are going to cut. So the pattern has these applique shapes in them that we are going to be able to cut out and transfer to our fusible web. I like to take those pieces and glue them onto old file folders. And they're a little bit stiff so that I'm able to trace them out. Once I have these shapes done, then I'm going to be able to trace them onto a fusible web. Now there are many different fusible webs on the market. I like to use a light one for a project like this because I will be stitching it down. But what they do have in common is we have paper on one side and sort of a sticky, bumpy piece on the other. The bumpy piece is the glue, so we're able to trace on that paper piece. I'm going to start with that bud. And then because I did glue it on that file folder, I'm able just to trace around it. I need some leaves. We have these little pieces that are going to go on top on the sides. So these are this little area here, and they are cut the same color. I'm going to cut them out of the center of my flower, and I'm going to trace them as if they're one piece. And make sure that I have enough all the way around the outside. I'm going to trace the one coming right down that edge and then butt the second piece right up and then trace out the second one. The last thing I have to do is this stem. So I'm going to cut out those pieces. For the center one, I'm going to put a little snip into my fusible web. And then I'm going to cut around that shape in the center. So I still have that rose shape and the ends of the roses. And I will not be cutting this apart. I'm going to fuse the one onto one fabric. So I'm going to follow the directions to that fusible web and iron it down, let it cool, and do the same for those little side pieces. The background square is 8 inches by 10 inches. And I do like to do it just a little bit bigger, and then I like to trim it down when I finish the applique. I also will put a little fold just down the center, just with my hands, so I can see a little bit of a straight line. And now I have my little flower parts. So I have my stem, the outside of that rose, my 2 leaves, and that rosebud. So I'm going to cut out the rosebud. I'm going to cut out on that outside line. This area I'm not cutting out. It's still going to stay full. Instead of having this entire thing fused, I'm just fusing an outside border. And that way I saved some of that fusible web. These I drew so that straight line was together. Now I'm going to be able to just cut on one line down the center instead of cutting both of them apart. And when we look at the right side, we're going to have that rosebud. The center was not cut, and those edges are going to go on. I'm going to work on this rosebud first, the leaf second, and the stem third. Peel back that paper, lay it in the area where it's supposed to be. Now I'm going to be able to fuse these on. And I have decided to pull my little tips out a little bit. So once it's all fused on, we need to decide how to applique it. And here is a finished block. We have a choice. We can do all of this at the same time, fuse them all down and stitch all the way around, or do them in portions. I prefer to do them in portions. So I'm going to do the rosebud first. Then I will fuse on the leaves and do the leaves, and then fuse on the stem and do the stem. For most of this applique, I like to be able to stitch without changing threads or without knotting threads. And there's no path that I can go around here unless I go over top of a stitch. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to use 2 stitches, a buttonhole stitch and a straight stitch. I'm going to do a buttonhole stitch coming along here. Then I'm going to stop and I am going to change it to a straight stitch. Stitch down, change it back, and then stitch back. Now I can go all the way around without having to knot my threads and start again. And with a push of the button on my machine, it makes it really easy. So I'm going to have my machine help me do that applique all the way around without having to knot my thread. With a push of a button or a turn of a knob, chances are your machine can do this. I need a straight stitch and I'm going to need a blanket stitch. So I can switch back and forth between those stitches. So I'm going to be able to go around using that blanket stitch. Then go straight, turn it back, and this straight stitch is going to give me that ability to stitch in the ditch until I get to an area where that I can do that blanket stitch. Let me show you on the machine on how nice this is going to turn out. So my first row of stitching is going to go around this top. Now I've come to the area that I want to stitch down. So I'm going to raise the foot and I'm going to push the button so the stitch changes to a straight stitch. Put my needle down and stitch down. And I'm going to stitch right along that edge. Stop, put my needle up and change it back to the blanket stitch. I'm going to turn this and go back up. From here, then I'm able to go all the way around and finish right at that point. So there's no stopping and starting. This straight stitch is giving me the ability to change direction, and it camouflages my stitches. One stitch, rotate, and continue. So I'm going to be able to continue stitching and come back. So there we have it. We went here, we changed a straight stitch, went there, back, and we finished around. Now when I go to do the leaves, what I will do is I will lay the leaves down and put that stem there temporarily. I will iron these down and not iron this down. I then will stitch all the way around, do that straight stitch to the next leaf, and then go all the way around. Then I can fuse that on and go all the way around the stem. So when you look at the back, you can see where I went around the leaf, did that straight stitch, and then went all the way around. Once all of those blocks are stitched, I give it a good press. I then can trim it down to the size it needs to be. And in this case, it's 8 inches by 10 inches. So I'm going to have 6 in one row, 6 in the other, and I'm going to stitch them so the stems are going together. This turned out so cute with those little roses running up and down that table runner. This is going to look great on my dining room table. I might even add a border. So thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a Sewtacular day. Bye.